Thank you for hearing us. My name is Grace Ross, and today I'm wearing the hat of the Director and Coordinator of the Mass Alliance Against Predatory Lending, although I am proud to say that I know many of the folks who've spoken this morning so eloquently, and hats off to them. I will not speak about the details of the program in quite the same way. I spoke in January at the budget hearings for the administration because I was deeply concerned about what was a completely obvious direction in which our housing market is going. As somebody who works on foreclosures, as of late this spring, the state had seen 54,000 foreclosures since 2007. We know from many valid sources that a foreclosure generally includes 2 families on average in Massachusetts, and although we've changed the law to protect tenants, many of our tenants don't know that they're protected post-foreclosure. So let's be conservative. Perhaps 80,000 families have been dumped into homelessness in the last 4.5 years. And in addition, as we know, if one of those units is empty, the banks are not putting them back on the market. So again, let's be conservative. Perhaps 120,000 folk, between the folks who are now looking for homes and the number of homes gone. We've got pressure of 120,000 units on the entire state housing market. So the conversation, while I honor the stories about battered women and folks who have small children, or even more horrifying, or pregnant and cannot get shelter, I really think this is a much larger problem. And while DHCD is here to talk about the homeless regulations, you are also in the position to be advocates within the administration and across the state for the fact that we simply cannot talk about this conversation as if it's the same conversation we were having 10 or 20 years ago. I asked some friends who stayed in the area that I no longer work directly with low-income families, and asked them, we're looking at about the same statistics in terms of the number of folks that the state is willing to house. I said, if you added together those folks and the folks who get turned away and the folks who get turned away and not counted because they're never even allowed to put in an application, and then you add all the folks that you know that are staying doubled up and in cars, where are we? And one of them said she really wasn't in a position to say because we don't have the statistics, but if she were to guess, she would assume that in fact if we used the old definition of homelessness that we used to use 20 years ago, that we're talking about perhaps 30,000 families. Let me say a couple more things. I hear you on the time, but this is a much bigger problem, and we've got to face the reality. One of the folks who used to make $75,000 found herself and her son, her daughter, and her daughter's 2 grandchildren foreclosed on, and although she fought because she had good legal challenges, they eventually left the home almost a year later. She lived on my couch after staying in a couple of different places with her son for close to a year. I live in a loft apartment, so just literally one space, and they stayed. Now, she has no credit left, so you can't get an apartment. She can't even buy a car. This is common for the folks who lose their homes because of foreclosure. I see nothing in these regulations that address the vast majority of people who are facing homelessness in our state. And it is ridiculous to talk about this problem as if it was the same as what it was. Her son went from being an A student to now we're not even sure we're going to be able to keep him in school after being without a home. He doesn't know that. He thinks he was housed, but he wasn't. And when you talk to people and ask them how did they end up getting homeless, we work with folks in foreclosure all the time. And all we have to do is show them how the property values were ramped up with the house that they got and compare it to before they had the house the last time it was sold, for them to realize that it's not their fault. But if your workers are saying to people, well, why are you homeless? Without those folks having any political perspective within which to put the housing crisis, they think it's their personal fault. And these criteria make that conversation continue. Instead of the conversation being real about what's in the way of your getting housing, why is it that we can't get these empty units back on the housing market, and the administration and DHCD taking their bully pulpit in a position of saying we have to do something. The most obvious solutions here, putting folks in an emergency room or a police station or having DCF take their kids, is much more expensive in the short run as well as in the long run than shelter. Right? We've fought for years to have folks not overuse emergency rooms. This is short-sighted, much more expensive, and simply bad policy. So let me say this. The regulations say who you must serve. A very narrow field. No one said you couldn't serve everyone else. And if you don't think there's enough money, our state just moved to being the second highest income state in the country. There's plenty of money, and this administration can find that money. And you all are in a position to advocate your way up the ladder and insist that we have real solutions, not just argue about the wording of a particular piece of legislation which would allow you a lot more leeway. Thank you.